Buongiorno e benvenuti questa domenica mattina per il nostro Meet the Artist, incontro con Rita Ackermann. Come sapete siamo molto felici di aver potuto aprire quella mostra ieri sera e vorrei innanzitutto ringraziare tutte le colleghe che hanno aiutato a organizzare questo evento. Ringrazio Céline Muschietti, Valentina Bernasconi, Danilo Agostini e soprattutto anche il Dipartimento di Comunicazione, Sarah Greenwood, Martina Santurri sono qui. Grazie a tutti voi. E abbiamo con noi non solo Rita Ackermann, l'artista, ma siamo molto felici di avere con noi anche questa mattina Pamela Kort. Pamela è una storica d'arte molto importante. Ha lavorato negli ultimi decenni soprattutto sull'arte europea nel suo rapporto con l'arte americana, quindi una delle grandi specialisti della pittura degli ultimi decenni. Sta per concludere un importante libro su Gerhard Richter e i pittori tedeschi degli anni 70, 80, 90 e come sapete forse già era anche Pamela che ha contribuito a un saggio importante per il nostro catalogo che abbiamo prodotto per la mostra. E così Pamela e Rita ovviamente nel corso di questo lavoro si sono conosciute, sono entrate in contatto, ci sembrava una buona occasione di avere tutte e due oggi here con noi. Adesso I'm switching to English to have both of them with us this morning. I am sure that given the long study that Pamela did and the many talks she had with Rita during the preparation of the catalog essay and the talk, we have the most competent interviewer here with us. And the talk will be about 40 minutes, and as a matter of fact, afterwards you are also invited, of course, to ask questions if case there might be any. So, Pamela, the floor is yours.
Thank you for coming. I'd like to first thank Tobia Bezzola and his staff, particularly Chiara Ottavi, for inviting me. And most of all, I want to thank Rita Ackermann for agreeing to talk with me about this. It's not really a given that an artist feels comfortable talking about her work. And we have this great opportunity. And thank you very much, Rita, for being here with me. Dr. Bezzola asked me to do a short presentation about Rita before I start with the questions, in case some of you are not familiar with Rita Ackermann's biography and work. So Rita Ackermann was born in Budapest, Hungary, and grew up in that still then East Bloc country. But contrary to what you might think about what life was like for her in Hungary, it was positive. And she had a liberal upbringing, and she had inspiring teachers. And she, the Budapest Fine Arts Museum is a treasure trove, and she availed herself of that early. And at home, there were several art books, and she discovered the work of Gauguin, Picasso, and American abstract expressionists. And at the same time, she was always, from teenage on, almost interested in the movies. And there were retrospectives there of interesting films. And she went to them. There was also a tremendous underground scene. And in some of the imagery in the show, you'll see reference to these coming-of-age movies. If you look at them that way, it's just one layer of their dimensions. I make sure I don't go on too long, otherwise I give a lecture here. Then it wasn't a given also that she could get into the Budapest Art Academy. Competition was tough. And she made it. She got in there. And she discovered during the time that she was there, a French philosopher, Paul Virilio, you'll hear her talk, I hope, about it, who had been translated into Hungarian. And then suddenly, a real thing happened. an offer of a scholarship in New York City came, and she accepted it and entered the work of New York City. It's interesting what that break effectuated, and I hope she'll talk more about it. I mean, to stay at Live at first, she was waitressing and just intent on staying in New York City, and I'm so glad that you did that and you made it. And by 1994, word had really spread about her. I mean, that's in itself a great accomplishment. Mm-hmm. And she did an early show at the New Museum of Art, and Andrea Rosen, who's still known. I mean, she was in a cutting-edge gallery in Soho. So to bring this to the present, she basically laid the basis for the later work, as you'll see when you go around in this exhibition with these earlier images. But it's never a one-to-one relationship. It's really a dialogue about emergence and slow processes of erasure. She may disagree with that as we continue, but that's what I see, the way I see it. The work is also very forward-looking, and this is really an important aspect of it. It's about a troubled times, at least that's the way I read it. But she's in no sense pessimistic about the possibilities of the future of life on the planet. And I think that's an important stance because it too is hidden in a way. These are not just narcissistic works, even though many of the early works sort of look like you. These are works with a message for those with eyes to read them. And there are many other works she did in the period between 2002 until 2018 that are not on view here. I think it's a very interesting strategy to juxtapose these two groups of work and really give us a chance to get the essence of her work. So that's a brief introduction. Am I speaking too quickly? No, it's all right. Okay. So Rita, I'd like to ask you about what I just mentioned, the title of this show, Hidden, and what it has to do with the two bodies of work on view here, ones that you made at the beginning and most recently.
So before I answer your question, I like your introduction a lot. It was very good to me to hear, the lead up to this exhibition, because I think it's important that we look at the entire body of work from 1993 to now, to 20, which is 30 years. So wow, what an incredible opportunity I got from the museum to show, 30 years of work at the very beginning and at the end. So when I chose the title Hidden, I was thinking to show that how this very direct imagery, what I had in the early works, which was almost posterity, almost poster-like. And you will ask me later about, Hungarian influences. But yeah, we had a great poster, designing posters. Like Hungarians were strong on designing posters, like Lajos Kassák, and all the futurism, that they were really good at designing posters. So that was an imagery for me to understand well, like how black and white and red work so well as posterity. So the minute when I got to America, I thought I have to survive, and I have to make sure that I will have attention as an artist. So the posterity came to mind first, that how I can really hit people's vision with my imagery. Then later I saw that works. Posterity really works, directness and visibility really works, and I was thinking how to hide that. And that was basically from 1996 to 2018. I was working on and off to hide the imagery, which I came up with to be visible. And So I thought, okay, I will pick up the conversation about hidden and not hidden with this opportunity to exhibit the very not hidden, the very visible, the very interested in gaining attention and then disappear behind the work, which is the last series, the Mama series.
That's a great answer. I mean, I'm learning even as I do this interview. In connection with what you just mentioned, the posters art that you discovered in Hungary, how much of your imagery, both now in the later works in the last room and in the earlier works, such as this painting here or this one, how much of it still addresses your youth in Hungary and what you did there, the schooling you had, the things you did? For example, the underground scene and the quad.
Yes, you mentioned in the introduction, we were a lucky Eastern Bloc country. We were more, they call it the bubblegum communism. That's how they call it, the bubblegum communism, which was a very easy existence for culture. And then, you could track down whatever or whoever you wanted in books and in films. And of course, they preferred the socialist vision. So we got all the socialist thinkers from the Western world, and of course Godard, and not directly Herzog, but all the great directors of the Western world, as you said, kept retrospectives, and we were able to read the groundbreaking works of Orwell and see the movie 1984. So there was always a criticism on the Western society, but we were allowed to look at the Western culture and then make up our mind. And then, of course, the abstract expressionism, American expressionism, was also. I mean, I read later that it was a creation of CIA, which might be true, but it was a great creation, and it was important to embrace that at the academy. So.
Is that one of the reasons that it's often said? In fact, I know that you did a book of drawings, De Kooning.
Mm-hmm.
And
the Kooning was also very available in Hungary. That was somebody who I was always attracted to his work, but so as very classical works like the Gauguin, Van Gogh, and since I'm not from a family of artists, I was introduced as a coffee table catalog to all the great masters. So that was really amazing.
What was it like at school? I mean, did you just look at like socialist realist images, or did you have teachers that were pounding communism into you, or what was that like?
So in communism, it was a very broad education. Even in high school, we had philosophy and aesthetics.
And Rudolf Steiner?
No, it was actually the communist education, but was embracing a lot of Waldorfian education because Waldorf comes. His ideas eventually was created for the matchbook. Match factory. So the children of the match factory who first were able to introduce the Waldorf education. So I think it was a communist-friendly idea to embrace Waldorf education. So in public school we had a Waldorf-like education, which was a great thing to introduce children to art, because whoever was interested in art, like me, I could spend half of my education just making drawings and paintings.
I'd like to, when I refer to the denim painting, it's this blue painting over here, which you'll have a time to look at closely, but in that painting and in many of the drawings, they look like about a coming of age. And of course, I know from your generosity in sharing information with me that you were really interested in movies in Budapest, also as a teenager, that dealt with coming of age themes, and later in New York. For example, Peter Gotar's Time Stands Still. Would you care to explain a little bit more of how these movies, what they meant to you and why, and how maybe we can see traces of them in the work?
So the coming of age movies, I guess, yeah, Peter Gotar, I'm very glad that we are talking about him, because I feel obligated to raise awareness to Hungarian artists who are not that well known in the Western world, and then Peter Godar is one of them. And yeah, that movie was very influential for me when I saw it when I was 15. And it's a movie about the traumatic time of Hungary trying to break out from communism in '56. Like what we see repeatedly happens with the Eastern Bloc countries, that they try to, reach out to the Western world, but the Western world either interested or not. So in '56, the Western world not interested to save the Hungarians, and therefore this movie creates that tension that when you are 16, then you have really seriously have to decide that you are leaping into mediocrity and communism, where you just disappear as an individual, or you take your backpack and try to escape to the West. And in Hungary, it wasn't so difficult to escape to the immigration was not so hard. I mean, you had to wait for a passport for 5 years, but that wasn't so hard, and you didn't get shot on the border. So it was a big difference than East Germany. So yeah, that was in the mind of a young person in Hungary when I was growing up, that what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my backpack and immigrate to the West, or I will stay here and maybe, just have a comfortable life to be a nobody.
Well, when you got to the United States, then there was a new cultural influence that you opened yourself up wide to. And you saw such things as Streetwise, which is another coming-of-age movie in New York City. And what was your impression? I mean, what did you see parallels between life that you had left behind everywhere popping up also in New York? How was that for you?
So it was a very good time to arrive to New York. I think I got lugged out on that, because in the early 90s, when I arrived to New York, I was telling you this before, that I didn't know that, but being Hungarian and being Eastern European was kind of cool. And there was this movie Jim Jarmusch made, Stranger in Paradise, where there is this Hungarian girl, and she just sort of doesn't know anything about, America, but she has the vision of America as a dream, and then she comes to America, and she's so much cooler than all the Americans that she gets, kind of have this position that she's wiser than the American cool. So there was that movie, and then arrived exactly in this. I remember I saw a month before I left Hungary, A Stranger in Paradise in Hungary, and then so when I arrived and I was Hungarian, that was sort of a cool thing, but also in the 90s, the American culture was in shambles. I mean, not the culture, but the art world was in this interesting place where suddenly there was no money, and the younger generations who wanted to be the next generation on the art scene, they were just so free. So it was almost like kids on the street style, that you're so free to make whatever you want because there's no money involved. So you just do whatever. And then there were these young artists who, we were looking at Streetwise, that movie somehow that was influential. It's a documentary.
Christina F., right?
Christina F. was something I could contribute to the Americans because nobody knew about Christina F. This movie was a collaboration between many Western countries. I think it was German, English, French. I don't know how many nationality that movie had, but it was in English. And David Bowie's concert was the climax of the movie. And it was about a girl who was 13 years old and got into heroin. And then the imagery was very disturbing. And then I saw only this movie through Bravo magazine.
While you were in Hungary.
While I was in Hungary, because we had we exchanged Bravo magazines. We didn't really have that magazine.
It's a German language teen publication.
Yeah, anyway, so Bravo was my Hungarian education about the Western world. And that's how I saw Christiana F. And then I
in New York.
In New York, I saw Christiana F. as a movie. And then I showed it to my friends who were making kids that time. That here is this, movie from Europe that you're gonna have to see. And then they were making kids that time, which became the very influential and educational movie about drugs for kids.
If you look later in the drawing room, you're going to see images, I think that, in my opinion, have something to do with that film because it unfolds in Bahnhof, which is in the train station, and you see these desperate young people. And I think that you gave form to them is wonderful.
It was a little bit like that, yes.
So in the denim painting, though, so this blue one over here, there's a totally different source, and that's one of the things that makes your art so interesting to me, is that it has all these different layers. And for me, I was curious, you wanted to set up a dialogue with Paul Gauguin. What was that about? Because if you look at the painting, it's called Who Are We? What Are We? Where Did We Come From? Which is more or less a paraphrase of the same title by Gauguin. And also the format of the painting, and also the fact that it's done on a non-traditional artist material. Could you comment?
Yes, I'm looking for
a Gauguin
moment.
Yeah.
A friend of mine just recently said he's an art student. Didn't we all have a Gauguin moment? And we did. And I did too.
What about the material on which it's painted?
But I want to talk about Gauguin. I think he was one of the first pop artists. Like Van Gogh and Gauguin, they both have this way of communicating through their work that it's just never going to be misunderstood. It's so direct and it's so attractive that somebody who doesn't know anything about art will still understand and love. So I was curious about that, and then talking earlier about the posterity and how you embrace an image that that just everyone will pay attention to. And that was a way of surviving, that to find an image, a composition, and some kind of subliminal message that everyone knows, but it's still hidden in my painting, and you don't know why you like it. So it's like a subliminal ad. And you suddenly buying McDonald's, but you don't realize that it's already like your saliva is like a Pavlovian. Yeah. So I think that's what I was doing, but it wasn't very conscious. But I needed to survive and be recognized. Therefore, I did it.
So it's a dialogue, in a way, what you're saying, between origins, your own origins and survival transposed into the subject of a painting about the survival of supposedly Gauguin's painting, the last vestiges of humanity, before civilization came to the Polynesian islands. But it's also about the survivals of your private childhood past, because that material, denim, is no accident. Could you comment on that?
So, yeah, we talked about this, so I'll talk about it now.
I'm sorry to
no, it's
come
good.
too close.
So slowly when I realized how important for me to embrace where I come from, because the first reaction, what we see in this exhibition is really from 93 to 96 of the old works, is that how much I want to get rid of from my background and become American, more American than Americans are. So then how slowly I can sneak in those heritage where I come from. So that denim was a curtain, what I had one, a cool curtain what I had in my room from Hungary. So yes, that's how the denim
Thank
came.
you for sharing this very personal detail. What about the adolescent girls in them? They have a certain performative aspect. And you've told me they are about bodies in danger. What do you mean by that? That what is it about them being in danger, yet somehow not tangible, and this performative aspect?
So, should I talk about the golem too in here? Or just the first one?
You can talk about anything here. It's easy. Whatever you...
Yeah, so really these girls I was painting then, it was a fantasy imagery. And I created this superhero in my head, which can act out all these dangerous scenes, but at the end they're all right. So there's all these life-threatening situations they are in, but at the end of the story, they are much more untouchable, and they are invincible. So they invite you in and want you to hear their stories, but at the same time, they create a wall around themselves that you really have to keep out. And this thing was the first time that later I realized that there was a duality in the work, that there is this protective and building a wall around, like being a Trojan horse. Mm-hmm. So hiding in this creature, but also being extremely exposed, and so it has a double effect.
Well, I think what you've just touched upon is super interesting, because though these images look very representational, what you're implying is that they're actually just shells of something, that they're not mimetic at all, that they have a different function for you. They're almost oxymorons themselves. Can you talk maybe just a few more seconds about that? Because people are so eager to say, well, the new work is figurative. I mean, the older work is figurative, and the newer work is abstraction. And this is really a dialogue between abstraction and figuration. And I don't think so at all. I see it much more connected, these things that are coming up.
Yes, so that's an interesting point, that they were already hidden in the very direct work. So there was already this duality of being exposed and being concealed, which is the dialogue of my work.
Well, that's
since
to the point.
Yeah, to the point.
Exposed and concealed.
Yeah, which it's great to point out, because I wasn't even thinking to this conversation. Yeah, the early work had this duality of being hidden and being concealed, but at the same time so exposed that you just think you see everything and you're invited in, and then meanwhile there is a very clear closed offness.
And the later work.
And the later work has clearly the abstraction, which abstraction always conceals in a way to. It's not about abstraction, so you conceal the meaning of the painting. I don't really have meaning of the painting, and the meaning of the painting is concealed from me too. So I never really know a title while I paint a painting. It's just comes later when I understand a little more about the painting. So maybe in the older work, I would say the hidden is hidden from me too.
That's really interesting in terms also of this picture here, the golem, because I know that you've you can see kind of a golem in it, but you said it was an accident. And I'm curious about your interest in the accident and your real fascination with the work of Paul Virilio, the French philosopher. Could you tell us what it is about Virilio's thinking? I mean, it's a huge universe, by the way, but to sort of boil it down to a few things, what it has to do with the painting?
So yeah, we should not even open out that basket of how you call that?
A bag of worms. But maybe we could go around
it's important
it.
to talk about Virilio because I have I was just so drawn to his work from early on, even before I built my own vocabulary in fine art. So, but he has an apocalyptic thinking, and then this apocalyptic thinking, the duality is very important. So he was always raising attention in his work, in his thinking, that when you when you invent a ship, you invent the shipwreck at the same time. So there is always an element of disaster, an accident when you make a leap to the unknown, you invent something, you create something, you create the positive and the negative. So I guess I was interested in that.
And pure war?
And then the war idea, that was later when he sort of war called pure war, which is this, it actually allows such a broad thinking about disaster and beauty and serenity, harmony and war. And then he does always talk about war as cinema is war, war is cinema. So movement creates war. He also believed that after politics will be just war, nonstop. What we live in.
But you
obviously.
You have a more positive view about this. Do we see that in the last room where you do those war paintings, how your take on this comes into the present moment?
I'm not doing this premeditatively. I think also that this is just something that you need to trust in your wrist to be able to do once you are circling around the same subject for 30 years. And the war drawings is something that I research and collect from children, as I told you, and I research and collect from the Native Americans who did this really crazy, beautiful battle wars on construction yellow pads, notepads. And what interests me about that there is always a very organized sense of harmony in those drawings. So I try to reach that organized harmony in my paintings.
Do those paintings in the last room have something to do with a work like Picasso's Guernica, or do they? I mean, I'm still getting a handle on them because you need to look at their surfaces, and they don't reproduce well in the thumbnails I had. So I'm really curious.
The surface of the paintings are sort of put through war. I guess that's how I paint also. Most of the paintings from this period, I feel like there was a clear battleground before it came to harmony. I hope that's what one can conceive when you look at them. But yeah, that I do believe that there is no way to make art before, no way to make art without putting the work through a traumatic experience, and that's life too. Like I don't think you can live life without traumatic experience, but that's also the beauty of it. So you might as well just embrace it. So that I hope that my paintings, yeah.
Well, they
show
do.
That.
They're challenging. I think one of the last questions I want to ask before I ask you to ask questions, because we have this unique opportunity, is I didn't mention at the beginning, but you also are very interested in music, and you had your own band for a while. And when I walked into that last room and I saw, Woody Guthrie as one of the titles of the work, I was like, I went back to my own, 60s revolutionary kind of, period. And I wondered what a musician like Woody Guthrie means to you, and what does music mean to you, and can we see any of that in the paintings? Is there a rhythm, a tempo, or?
Woody Guthrie came up because I wanted to honor him with a painting, because he was somebody who was a troubadour of the American troubadour of the Second World War, and also because I listen a lot of Bob Dylan, and Bob Dylan would have never existed without Woody Guthrie. So he's sort of the origin of that purist sentiment of
prophetness?
We were talking about this, that prophets are really, I think it's a misunderstanding about prophets. They are not really seers. They are the spokespeople of God. So I'm not trying to give a religious message here, but maybe I do, that it's a very purist approach. When somebody sings songs so clearly and so simplistically. So Woody Guthrie was also a great cartoonist, and then he was fighting in the Second World War, and I thought that his optimistic naivety I could fuel into the paintings to make this traumatic experience of war into some grandiose happy ending. So you see much more lightness than you ever seen, but then you experience the war and then its traumas as well.
Isn't that, in a way, what your paintings are about throughout this whole exhibition and the drawings? So light, so direct, so obvious, and yet hidden. I think she's happy. Would you like to comment? Or?
Yeah, no, I think that you said it.
Well, you made these works, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Could we thank Rita?
Thank you so much, both of you. I'm sure we have questions from the audience. Please feel free to speak up. Yes?
Wait, we need a mic.
First of all, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us now. And I enjoyed this exhibition very much. My question is, were you consciously or unconsciously inspired by Joan Mitchell?
I'm glad you asked me about Joan Mitchell because she really did not come to me for a long time till the last year. This summer I was looking at her work and I really like her. I was not a big fan of her work and I think I like her more as a person than her paintings. She really made some amazing work, but they were not that influential for me. But as a painter, I admire her so much.
We need another question. Don't miss this opportunity, please.
Hi, Rita. I am also, always interested in understanding if there is a community life in big cities like New York. And so my question is, when you arrived in New York before being noticed by gallerists, if you found some friends, some artists to work with, if there was like places, clubs or studios to share with, or instead if you were by yourself, so more an independent and selfish work?
What do you mean, before New York or New York?
No, when you arrived in New York.
Who did you hang out with in New
yeah,
York? Were you totally on your own?
Yeah, I was trying to touch down on that early 90s. When I arrived to New York, it was a very open community of young artists trying to make it, as I think it's always like that in different generations. And I think it's happening right now in New York too, that young artists are very supportive of each other and young galleries are looking at what young artists are doing. So everyone is eager to make it. And then around that time when I arrived, yes, there was kids coming out from Cooper Union, which is a very prestigious non-profit, that used to be non-profit art school, and talented kids were coming out from there. And then I was lucky enough to meet them, and you know, everyone is desperate for roommates, and I was so lucky to, you know, be introduced to them, so I could build around, you know, around that crowd, my own practice. So yeah, exactly, that's what happened. 42nd Street, we had this building, which was kind of a squad building, and that's where my first studio was with other artists.
Another question, please. If you won't ask one, I want to ask you one. In the last room, because I'm still discovering these paintings, they have sort of what looks like a grid on them. And I was curious, I don't think you did that to transfer images into a larger format, but I didn't see it before I got in front of the paintings. It's very lightly formatted lines. Can you comment on that?
Sure. So that grid is mimicking the yellow paper pad in America. That's the cheapest paper pad you can get for make your grocery list. So this yellow paper pad was around for, I'm sure, 100 years. And this is the paper pad that the Indians used for their battle drawings. And the first time when I saw these battle drawings, it was in Texas in the Austin Museum. And I was so fascinated by the beauty of this aging cheap paper. I always like to look at the most modest material you can make art with. So I thought, wouldn't that be nice to create a surface large, which is, of course, you can never create a paper that big like these paintings. I mean, you can, but you need strong paper. But this is the most vulnerable, most fragile paper. So I imitate on linen these yellow pad notebooks, and the grids are blue lines, and then there's some red line. So that's what you see.
Now that's interesting, because if she has any mimetic reference, it's to the material itself, which she was interested in these drawings by American Indians, I take it. Yes. Last opportunity, don't be shy. Tobia?
So thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Pamela, for this most lively talk. And thank you, most of all, Rita, for a wonderful show, for your presence, and for your beautiful work. Thank you. Buona domenica a tutti e tutti.
Thank you.